Join me as we learn Chitas, the Chumash, for the sixth Torah reading of Parshas Behar-Bechukosai. When they are combined, we are now at the sixth Torah reading in chapter 27, verse 1. Yesterday was a very long Torah reading about the consequences that happened to the Jewish people when the lack of observances. Today we move on to the laws pertaining donating the value of human life. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemer, and God spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber al Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. V'amar talim, you will tell them, Ish ki yafli neder, when a person articulates a vow, be'erkecha nefashis l'Hashem, pledging the endowment of a life to God. What that means, as Rashi explains as follows. Ki yafli, words first of all, ki yafli means, yafli yafarish befiv, he articulates, he says it. Be'erkecha nefashis. Over here the Torah is telling us that if a person wants to give to the Holy Temple, the value of a person's life, the value of my head, or something, the value of me, I want to give that amount to the Holy Temple. Verse 3. And the fixed monetary endowment that a person will give. If it's a male person, will be for the amount from 20 years old. From 20 years old until 60 years old. For a person from age 20 to 60, that endowment will be 50 shekel of silver according to the sacred shekel. That means the holy type of shekel that are designated for holy purposes, which we mentioned previously in the book of Exodus, which is 20 gerah for the shekel, which gives you about 800 gram, 1.76 pounds. Rashi, v'hoya erkecha, meaning that the value should be, ein erech zel lashon damim. When we talk about value, he's talking about money, not that a person is worth that. Ela bein shu yakar bein shu zol, whether a person is expensive or he's cheap. Kefi shana, it doesn't make a difference how much a person thinks he's worth. Every single person has the same value, and it goes by years. Erkecha k'may erech, meaning value. The reason why it says erkecha, Rashi says he doesn't know where it comes from. According to grammatic Lashon, holy tongue, according to grammatic Hebrew, it should be only erech, not erkecha. Verse 4, if she's female, then she's a value of 30 shekel. Verse 5, what if from 5 years old to 20 years old, then the value that you're going to give for the male, is 20 shekel, for a female, 10 shekel. Not that the one that's promising is a child, because a child can't make any promises, it's not worth anything. If an adult says, if a person says the value of this child was 5 years old, that's how much I want to give to the Holy Temple, then he has to give 20 for the male and 10 for the female. Verse 7. What about from 1 month old until 5 years old? Then for a male it's going to be 5 shekel, silver. And for the female, 3 shekel of silver. Rashi, next verse, verse 7. What about 60 years and up? That was only until 20 to 60. What about 60 and older? If it's a male, for a male it's going to be 15 shekel. For a female, 10 shekel. Rashi, when a person reaches the older years, then their value goes down. But a woman at that point is more valuable, meaning that the woman, as she gets older, doesn't age, her value doesn't go down as less as a man. Because, if you look at the value, you look at the man over 60 is 15 down from 50, while the woman is 10 down from 30. Over here you see, and that is because, you see, a person, as a male, as he gets older, his value lessens more than a third. That means until 60 was 50, and now he's 15. And a woman, only her value depreciates only by a third. This is what it says in the Talmud, and the reason of this we can find by a usual statement that people say, as the Talmud quotes, people say, when there's an old man at home, there's problems in the house. And when there's an old woman at home, you have a treasure at home, and it's a good sign for the home. And that is because the nature of a man is when he's young, he works hard and everything else, but as he gets older, he sits at home and he's always complaining, and this hurts him and that aches him and every so often. However, a woman who's usually not working so hard, even when she's younger, meaning not with labor type of work, therefore, even when they're older, and they're usually with the house and doing things, even when they're older, they're able to do those things, and they continue to do those things in a more generous way as well. Verse 8. V'im mochu, what happens if a person is, if he made a pledge, but he's too poor to pay the pledge that he made? If he's too poor to pay for what he pledged, then he will place him before the Kohen. The Kohen will then make an evaluation, and according to how much the pleasure can afford, that's what the Kohen will decide that he should be valued, as that endowment should be given. V'im bachu, Rashi, that he's too poor to give this endowment. They'll put this person who he's evaluating in front of the Kohen. That means the person who he pledged. So, for example, the poor man has to bring the individual who he says, I want to give his value. That individual then comes before the Kohen. The Kohen evaluates what this person should be worth, that the poor man can be able to afford to give this individual's value. According to what the poor man has and what he owns, he has to take whatever he is able to, and he has to make sure that the guy still has money to live with. Mita, car, v'kesses, he has a bed, pillow, blanket, klayumnus, work that he works with. If he was a donkey, he has to make sure he has his donkey. He has to keep him his donkey so he can be able to work, and shouldn't take everything what he gave and give it to the temple. Verse 9. But if the person decides that he's going to give a sacrifice, whatever the person decides he's going to give is holy. For example, if he says, I want this leg of this animal should be for a scent offering. It has to say, and then the whole entire how do they do it? They sell the entire animal as an scent offering. And the money that the person will keep, chulin, is considered non-holy money, besides for the value of that leg. So that means he has to sell the entire animal, and then take the remainder, whatever's not used, or take with the value off that leg, and everything else has to be considered, the leg is considered holy, and everything else he can keep. Verse 10. One is not allowed to exchange or substitute one animal for another animal, or replace it. Good for a bad, or bad for a good one. But if he decides to substitute or exchange an animal, as a punishment, both of them become holy. What does this mean, Teiv B'ra? Meaning he wants to do as follows. Tam b'balmum, one that's with a blemish, one that's without a blemish. He says, for sure a good for a good one or a bad for a bad one. Over here the Torah is telling us that even if you want to say, I want to make it better, I want to give a nicer animal, so he's going to take the bad one and give a better one. The Torah says no. The one that you decided that you have to give has to be one that's given. Verse 11. Although it is forbidden to exchange or substitute, but if it is a defiled animal or a blemished animal, which is not allowed to be brought as a carbon, you're not to bring it as a carbon, you're not to bring it as a sacrifice. He has to then present the animal before the Kohen. Rashi explains, we're talking about one that has a blemish, which then becomes unfit to bring as a sacrifice. The verse is telling me here that if it's a holy, sanctified animal, but it is complete without a blemish, you cannot redeem it. The only way that you can make this animal that was sanctified and redeem it with money is only if it got a blemish where now it no longer is fit to bring as a sacrifice. What does the Kohen do? So the Kohen will then have to evaluate the animal, whether it's good or bad. According to the evaluation that the Kohen gives, that's what you will have to pay. Rashi, whatever the Kohen evaluates it, then if a person wants to buy it and he wants to redeem it, then then that's a different story. But if any other person wants to buy it, that's the value that they would have to pay for it. Verse 13. What happens if the person himself, the owner, wants to redeem it? So in the case that we mentioned previously, that goes according to the Kohen's evaluation, that's if anybody else wants to redeem it. If the owner himself wants to say, you know what, I want to get back my animal, then, Yosef Chamishisi al-Erkecha, he has to add a fifth to its value. Rashi. When it comes to the original owners, then the Torah adds a fifth, 20% on it, on its value. So too will apply if a person dedicates, sanctifies his home, or a field, that if the owners want to get back their original item that they gave, so then they have to pay 20% surcharge on that. Now we talk about property. So too, verse 14 tells us about property. A person who decides he wants to give his house and make it holy, consecrates his house holy, Kodesh Lashem to God. The Kohen will then evaluate, whether it's good or bad. Whatever the Kohen gives its value, they are the appraisers, and they establish what the value is on that home. Verse 15. What if the guy that sanctified it, he himself wants to buy it back? He has to add 20% on it, kesef of silver, erkecha alav, or whatever the value was, and then he can get to keep it. This concludes the 6th Torah reading of Parshas Behar-Bechukosai.